Drive south from the town of Banff toward the confluence of the Bow and Spray rivers, and there it is. The Fairmont Banff Springs rises from the valley floor like something carved by a force older than architecture. 11 stories of Tyndall limestone, towers and turrets cutting against a sky that in winter is the specific blue of high altitude and cold. In summer, a deep translucent green that seems to come from inside the mountains rather than above them. The building stretches more than 250 meters across its widest face. Its chateau-esque rooflines step upward against the rock face of Sulphur Mountain, which rises directly behind it, a wall of stone that dwarfs everything human, yet somehow makes the hotel look larger, not smaller, by proximity. People come from every country on Earth to stand in front of it. They have been doing so for nearly 140 years. But this is not a story about beauty. In the autumn of 1928, in a room on the 8th floor of this hotel, a family came to stay. A man, a woman, and a young daughter. What happened next produced screams that guests reported hearing through the walls for years afterward. Bloody handprints on a bathroom mirror that chambermaids said they could not scrub away no matter what they used. And a room that hotel management eventually sealed behind plaster and brick because no amount of cleaning, repainting, or redecorating could stop what guests continued to experience inside it. Room 873. This is the story of the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, a castle built on stolen land with blood money that became Canada's most celebrated address, that sealed its darkest room behind a wall, and that has been, for more than a century, masterfully beautiful and magnificently silent about everything it knows. If you've been following this channel's excavations into the dark histories behind the world's most celebrated landmarks, you're welcome to subscribe and keep exploring. To understand the Banff Springs Hotel, you must first understand the machine that created it. In 1867, Canada became a country. It was a country in name only. British Columbia, on the Pacific coast, had no meaningful connection to the eastern provinces. The land between them, the prairies, the mountains, the passes through the Rockies, was vast, largely unmapped by European eyes, and home to indigenous nations who had lived on it, traveled it, and considered it sacred for more than 10,000 years. The Canadian government made a promise to bring British Columbia into Confederation. It would build a transcontinental railway within 10 years, a ribbon of steel from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The railway would unite the country. It would open the West to settlement. It would carry goods and passengers across a distance that had previously required months to cross. What it required to be built was labor, enormous quantities of labor for the most dangerous sections. The blasting through the Rocky Mountains, the drilling through granite faces, the handling of nitroglycerin in narrow cuts where one miscalculation produced an avalanche of rock and bodies. The Canadian Pacific Railway solved this problem the same way the American Transcontinental Railway had solved it. They imported Chinese workers. Between 1881 and 1885, more than 17,000 men came from China and California to lay the western section of the CPR. They were paid $1 per day. White workers doing equivalent work were paid $1.50 to $2.50, with their provisions included. Chinese workers paid for their own food and gear out of their dollar. They were assigned the most dangerous tasks. Estimates of how many of them died during the construction range from 700 to 4,000, with one government statement summarizing it as 3 Chinese workers for every mile of track laid. Many of them were buried in unmarked graves along the line. Their families were often not notified. Compensation was not offered. The CPR treated them, in the language of one academic study, as energy commodities, expendable and easily replaceable, not men, resources. On November 7, 1885, the final spike of the Canadian Pacific Railway was driven at Craigellachie, British Columbia. CPR President Donald Smith stood at the center of the ceremonial photograph, surrounded by railway workers and officials. There is not a single Chinese worker in that photograph. They had been cleared from the frame before the camera fired. The railway that made Canada a unified country, and the railway that made the Banff Springs Hotel possible, was built on those bodies and that erasure. The government of Canada, immediately after the railway's completion, imposed the Chinese head tax, $50 per Chinese person seeking to enter the country. By 1903, the tax had been raised to $500, more than 2 years' wages. Its explicit purpose was to ensure that the workers who had built the railway could not afford to stay in the country they had built it for. This is the world that created the Banff Springs Hotel. This is the foundation on which the castle stands, before the railway, before the hotel, before the tourists. The Stoney Nakoda people called this place Mini Harpa. It means, in their language, the place where the water falls, a name for Cascade Mountain, whose rock face rises in layers that, from a distance, resembles cascading water. They had been coming to these valleys for more than 10,000 years. The oldest archaeological discovery in what is now Banff National Park is a Clovis point found on the shores of Lake Minnewanka, a stone tool dated to 13,000 years ago. The Stoney Nakoda called Lake Minnewanka Minwaki, the lake of the water spirit. It was both a gathering place and a sacred site, a location where ceremony was performed and where the community understood that something older than human time was present. They climbed Sulphur Mountain, which they called Mini Ruwin, foul-smelling water, for the hot springs that bubbled from its flanks, to harvest medicinal plants. They hunted bison in the valleys. They traded with the Tunixa, the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina across the passes. Chief John Snow of the Stoney Nakoda described the Rocky Mountains in terms that became part of the formal record of his nation's relationship to this land. These mountains are our temples, our sanctuaries, and our resting places. They are a place of hope, a place of vision, a place of refuge, a special and holy place where the Great Spirit speaks with us. In 1885, the year the railway was completed, the Canadian government created Banff National Park. It was Canada's first national park. It was 26 square kilometers of protected land around the hot springs, chosen because the springs were commercially valuable as a tourist attraction. The Stoney Nakoda were removed from it, not immediately, not in a single order. Through a series of regulations, restrictions, and incremental policy decisions, by 1890, the Stoney Nakoda had been effectively excluded from the park and from the mountain valleys their ancestors had used for millennia. They were prohibited from hunting within the park boundaries. They were prohibited from gathering plants. Their ceremonial access to sacred sites was ended. A park superintendent named Howard Douglas in 1903 explained the government's rationale for the exclusion in a report that blamed the Stoney Nakoda for the depletion of game animals in the Rockies. "They have systematically slaughtered the game," he wrote. The Stoney Nakoda had been hunting in these mountains for 10,000 years. The game depletion began after European settlement arrived. They were, however, welcomed back for one purpose. Starting in the late 19th century, the hotel and the park organized an annual event called Banff Indian Days, a tourist festival in which Stoney Nakoda and other First Nations people were invited to perform their culture for visitors. During Indian Days, they were required to wear full regalia at all times. They were required to abstain from alcohol. They were required to park their cars in the parking lot and present themselves as an authentic, pre-modern people for the benefit of paying tourists at the Banff Springs Hotel. The Stoney Nakoda were welcomed on these terms, as decoration, as spectacle, as a feature of the wilderness experience that the hotel was selling, and then expected to leave when the festival was over. They were officially welcomed back to the park in 2010, 120 years after they were driven out. The man who built the Banff Springs Hotel was born in Illinois in 1843 and came to the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1881 as its general manager, the American brought in to do what Canadians apparently could not: complete a transcontinental railway in a country that had been promising it for a decade. His name was William Cornelius Van Horn. He was one of the great organizational minds of the 19th century, a man who understood railways not merely as engineering problems, but as economic ecosystems, complete systems that required not only tracks and locomotives, but towns and hotels and reasons for people to ride the trains once you had laid them. When 3 CPR workers stumbled onto the hot springs on the slopes of Sulphur Mountain in November 1883, Van Horn understood immediately what he was looking at: not a geological curiosity, a business opportunity. The scenery of the Canadian Rockies was extraordinary. The problem was that it couldn't be moved to where the customers were. He said it plainly: "Since we can't export the scenery, we'll have to import the tourists." The solution was a series of grand resort hotels along the railway line, each one positioned at a point of maximum scenic drama, each one designed to justify the cost of a railway ticket by offering an experience that could not be replicated at home or in any European city. The Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City, the Empress in Victoria, the Chateau Lake Louise, And at the center of it all, at the confluence of the Bow and Spray rivers, at the foot of Sulphur Mountain, on the traditional territory of the Stoney Nakoda Nation, the Banff Springs Hotel. He hired architect Bruce Price of New York to design it. He gave him a budget of $250,000, an almost incomprehensible amount of money in 1886. He told him to build something that would make wealthy travelers from Europe and America feel that they had arrived somewhere that justified the journey. Price began designing. Construction started in 1886, and then something happened that is, given everything that followed, almost too perfectly symbolic to be accidental. During construction, Price's plans were misread. The hotel was built backwards. When Van Horn arrived at the site to inspect progress, he discovered that the magnificent views of the Bow Valley and the surrounding mountains, the entire point, the entire reason for the building's existence, faced the kitchen and the service areas. The grand guest rooms looked out onto the forested slopes of Sulphur Mountain. The kitchen had the view, the guests had the forest. Van Horn ordered an immediate addition, a rotunda pavilion built to give guests somewhere to stand and see the valley they had come to see. The building built backwards, the workers erased from the photograph, the people removed from the land. The hotel opened to the public on June 1st, 1888. It was the largest hotel in the world. The original Banff Springs Hotel was a 5-story wooden structure, cream-colored and sharp-roofed, that drew on the Scottish baronial architecture of the Highlands and the French chateau of the Loire Valley in the same breath. It was beautiful, without being entirely coherent, a building still finding its identity, still in the process of becoming what it was meant to be. Its transformation into the castle that stands today happened in stages. Between 1911 and 1914, architect Walter Painter designed and completed the 11-story central tower, its rock face composed entirely of Rundle stone, quarried along the Spray River, its dining area capped with a soaring dome, its 300 guest rooms each oriented toward the mountains that had made all of this possible. The Painter Tower became, for a period, the tallest building in Canada. The north and south wings were added in 1927 and 1928, following a fire in April 1926 that destroyed the original wooden structure. It was during these reconstructions that the castle found its final form, unified under a consistent chateau-esque vocabulary of steep-pitched roof lines, pointed dormers, corner turrets, and the rough gray limestone exterior that makes the hotel appear, in certain lights, to have grown from the mountain rather than been placed against it. The lobby, as rebuilt in 1928, stops guests where they stand. A vaulted ceiling of carved stone rises above a floor of polished marble. Archways deep enough to be corridors frame the views from room to room. The stone staircase sweeps upward in a curve that was designed to be descended at a particular pace. Slowly, one hand on the carved balustrade, face turned toward the ballroom below. The architects understood that a certain kind of beauty requires choreography. The Cascade Ballroom opens off the upper level, a room of chandeliers and dark wood paneling, its windows framing the mountains on 3 sides. It is a room built for dancing, for the kind of dancing that requires formal dress and a full orchestra, and the particular pleasure of moving through a space that was designed in every detail to make you feel that you are living at the height of something. The candles that line the curved staircase leading up to the ballroom are a later addition. In 1928, when the rebuilt hotel opened, guests poured in from across the world to see what the CPR had built in the Canadian Rockies. Celebrities, royalty, the wealthy seeking a wilderness experience contained within walls that confirmed their status. For the first 50 years of its existence, the Banff Springs Hotel did everything it was designed to do. The wealthy came, the famous came, the royal came. In June 1939, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the future Queen Mother, arrived as part of their royal tour of Canada, becoming the first reigning British monarchs to set foot on Canadian soil. The Banff Springs Hotel received them as if the hotel had been built for precisely this occasion, which, in a sense, it had. The entire premise of the building, this is a place worthy of the most important people on Earth, was confirmed when the most important people on Earth showed up to confirm it. Queen Elizabeth II came, Helen Keller came, Marilyn Monroe came in the early 1950s, and was photographed descending the grand staircase in a white dress, her expression the specific combination of radiance and exhaustion that belongs to a person who has been famous for too long and still cannot stop being beautiful. The guests who arrived in the 1920s and 1930s often stayed for months. This was an era in which the wealthy had both the money and the leisure for extended stays in grand mountain hotels, weeks of hiking and horseback riding during the day, dinner and dancing in the Cascade Ballroom at night. The particular pleasure of being somewhere so magnificent that leaving it felt like a diminishment. The hotel hosted conferences, royal visits, honeymoons, and suicides with approximately equal frequency. The Rockies attracted people in extremis in both directions. Those who had arrived at the peak of what life could offer, and those who had concluded, in the shadow of mountains that made human problems look appropriately small, that they were finished. A bellhop who worked at the hotel in the mid-1930s reportedly told his family, decades later, that a famous movie star staying at the hotel had jumped from an outside balcony during his tenure. He described it as a fact and a memory, no name, no record. The hotel has never confirmed it. The hotel has never confirmed many things. Before the 1926 fire, before Room 873, there was already, inside the Banff Springs Hotel, a room that did not officially exist. During the construction of the original 1888 wooden structure, a contractor made an error. A room was built with no windows and no doors, fully enclosed, fully formed, completely inaccessible, hidden inside the fabric of the building, without any route to reach it from the corridors around it. The error was not reported to the hotel's owners. It was not corrected. The contractor completed the building and moved on, leaving behind, sealed inside the walls of the most expensive hotel in Canada, a room that no one was supposed to know about. The room was discovered when the 1926 fire gutted the original structure. The flames reached areas of the building that had never been reached before, and in the debris, workers found evidence of the enclosed space, a void in the architecture with no function and no explanation. From that discovery, something began. Guests who had stayed near the room's location reported, looking back, strange sounds from the walls, shadows in the corridor, movements that could not be attributed to anyone who was actually there. Whether these reports predated the knowledge of the hidden room or were produced by it, no one has been able to establish. What is established is that the Banff Springs Hotel was, before it burned in 1926, a building already carrying a secret inside its walls, and that when it was rebuilt, the architects, presumably aware of what had been found, rebuilt it in a way that left no obvious trace of where the hidden room had been. The 1926 fire, in this reading, was not merely an architectural disaster, it was an opportunity. The fire that destroyed the original north wing of the Banff Springs Hotel broke out in April 1926. The wooden structure that Bruce Price had designed in 1886, the building that had started it all, the first grand hotel in the Canadian Rockies, burned to its foundations. CPR Chief Engineer John Orrock was brought in to design the replacement wings that would connect to and expand the already completed Painter Tower. The north wing was completed in 1927, the south wing in 1928. Together, they completed the hotel's current form, the castle as it now stands, unified in its gray limestone and chateau-esque detail, its roof lines rising in stages against Sulphur Mountain. The rebuilt hotel was, by any measure, grander than what had burned, larger, more unified, more deliberately spectacular. The stone that Price had only approximated in wood was now actual stone, quarried from the mountains, cut by Scottish masons and Italian stonecutters, imported by the CPR specifically for the work. Van Horn's hotel had been beautiful. Orrock's hotel was magnificent. It opened to the public in 1928, to the kind of reception that the CPR had come to expect. Overwhelming, enthusiastic, international. The world wanted to come to the Castle of the Rockies. The world was coming. And sometime in the early weeks or months of 1928, a family checked into a room on the 8th floor of the new North Wing, room 873, and the golden age of the Banff Springs Hotel was over. And the hotel was about to discover that the things you seal behind walls do not stay sealed. The story of room 873 has been told so many times, in so many versions, that separating what is claimed from what is confirmed requires the kind of care that the hotel has never applied to the subject. Here is what the most consistent version of the story claims. Sometime after the rebuilt hotel opened in 1928, a man checked into room 873 with his wife and young daughter. The room was on the 8th floor of the new North Wing. The window looked toward the mountains. The room was furnished to the standard of Canada's most prestigious hotel. Dark wood, good linens, the specific hush that expensive walls produce. What happened inside that room produced no public record, no police file that has been located, no names in any newspaper archive that researchers have found in nearly a century of looking, no inquest, no trial. What it produced was aftermath. Guests who occupied the room after the family were woken in the night by screaming, by the specific kind of screaming that is not a nightmare, by screaming that came from within the room, from the bathroom, from the mirror above the sink where the bloody handprints of a small child appeared and remained, through repeated cleaning, through multiple chambermaids, through every solvent the hotel could apply. The handprints came back. Every time they were scrubbed away, they came back, not always in the same position, not always the same number of prints, but always the prints of a child's hand, always in blood, always on the mirror. At some point, no one has been able to establish exactly when, management closed the room, moved its number off the floor plan, sealed the door behind a layer of drywall, and waited for the story to quiet down. It did not quiet down. Here is what is not a story. Here is what is verifiable by anyone willing to walk the 8th floor corridor of the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel and look carefully at the walls. On a floor where rooms are numbered with the suffix 73 on the floors above and below, room 773 exists, room 973 exists. There is no room 873. The 8th floor skips from 871 to 875. The gap is there. The absence is there. It does not disappear when the hotel tells you it was never a room. For decades, the physical evidence was even more specific. The baseboard along the wall where room 873 should have been was cut, not in the smooth, continuous run of a normal hallway, but cut to accommodate the width of a door frame that had been closed off. A light fixture was positioned above the wall in the location consistent with a room entrance. Knock on the wall in the adjacent spaces. Solid. Knock on the wall where room 873 should have been. Hollow. People knocked, people photographed the baseboard, people posted the photographs. The story persisted because the physical evidence persisted. In November 2017, the evidence was removed. A guest at the hotel that autumn documented the change and submitted photographs to a popular travel blog. The replastering had been done recently. The plaster was fresh, the paint not yet fully cured. The baseboard had been replaced in a continuous run. The light fixture had been removed. The hollow sound was gone, replaced by the same solid knock that the rest of the wall produced. The hotel said nothing, no statement, no explanation, no announcement to the media or to its guests. The last physical trace of room 873 was removed in the middle of a renovation cycle that the hotel did not publicize, during a visit season that had already ended, in a corridor that most guests would never have reason to examine closely. If nothing happened in room 873, why did the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel expend time and money in November 2017 to ensure that the last evidence of the room's existence could no longer be found? The official position of the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel is clear, consistent, repeated in every response to every journalist who has asked. Room 873 does not exist. A murder never occurred. During renovations over the decades, smaller rooms were occasionally enlarged, doors relocated, numbering systems changed. The gap in the floor numbering is a renovation artifact. The hollow wall was a construction anomaly. The cut baseboard was a maintenance detail. There was no family, there was no murder, there was no child. The hotel acknowledges ghosts it finds commercially useful. The ghost bride, a young woman in a white wedding dress who reportedly fell on the marble staircase in the late 1920s or early 1930s, catching her gown on a candle flame, breaking her neck before she reached her groom, is acknowledged with warmth. She has her own Canadian postage stamp. She has her own collector coin. She is the centerpiece of the hotel's annual Halloween Heritage Ghost Tour, for which rooms can be booked at premium rates. Sam Macaulay, the beloved Scottish bellman who worked at the hotel through the 1960s and 1970s, and who died in 1975, is acknowledged with warmth. Sam promised his colleagues before his death that he would return to haunt the hotel he loved, and return he apparently did. Guests report being assisted by an elderly Scotsman in a 1960s uniform who opens locked doors and helps carry bags, and who vanishes when tipped or addressed directly. Sam is delightful. Sam is good for business. Room 873 is not acknowledged. Room 873 is not delightful. Room 873 is not good for business. The distinction between the ghosts, the hotel markets, and the ghost it denies is in itself a kind of answer. Numbers can become abstract. So let us remember three names, or rather, let us remember the three people in this story for whom no names exist, and examine what that absence means. She was a bride. The story of the ghost bride is the most famous supernatural legend associated with the Banff Springs Hotel, famous enough to appear on a Canadian postage stamp and a collector coin, famous enough to be the centerpiece of the hotel's official Halloween programming. She is, in the hotel's telling, a romance, a tragedy softened by time and beauty, and the particular sentiment that attaches itself to youth cut short. Here is what the story says. Sometime in the late 1920s or early 1930s, the date has never been fixed, a young woman descended the curved marble staircase of the Banff Springs Hotel on her wedding day. The staircase was lined with candles. Her dress was white lace. She was going to meet her husband at the top, in the Cascade Ballroom, where the wedding dinner was waiting and the orchestra was ready. What happened next has two versions. In the first, her heel caught in the hem of her dress and she fell. In the second, her dress brushed against one of the candles and caught fire, and in the panic of flames and fabric, she lost her footing and fell. Either way, she fell. She broke her neck. She was dead before she reached the bottom. She is seen, reportedly, still ascending that staircase, dancing, alone, in the Cascade Ballroom. Standing in the bridal suite in the early hours of the morning when no one is supposed to be there. But here is the fact that the hotel's postage stamp and the hotel's Halloween tour and the hotel's commemorative coin do not feature. No one has ever found her name. Not a journalist, not a paranormal investigator, not a hotel historian with access to the guest records, not the researchers who have spent years looking for documentation of this event. No marriage registry in Banff or the surrounding region for the relevant period contains a wedding that ended in the death of a bride. No newspaper from the time ran the story of a woman who died on the staircase of Canada's most famous hotel on her wedding day. No inquest record has been found. No death certificate has been located. The Fairmont Banff Springs itself, in a recent statement about the ghost bride's legend, acknowledged that no written record confirms a bride passing or being injured at the hotel around this time. The hotel went on to say that the story had become a Canadian legend of its own, and that the romance of the Rockies kept it alive. A woman who is commemorated on a postage stamp and a collector coin and a Halloween tour has no name, has no death record, has no marriage record, has no grave. She has a postage stamp, and the question of whether she ever existed, or whether the hotel's commercial use of her story represents something more troubling than a simple ghost legend, remains open. The family in room 873 has no names. No researcher has found them. No police record from the Banff area in 1928 has surfaced with their names. No Alberta coroner's record from that period has been produced publicly. The hotel's records from 1928, if they exist, and the hotel has never confirmed whether they exist or what they contain, have never been made available to any researcher or journalist. What we have is the story as it has been told and retold since the late 1970s, when it first appeared in written form in regional papers and travel publications. A man, a wife, a daughter, a room on the 8th floor, something that happened in the night, screaming, handprints, and then a room sealed behind plaster. The hotel says nothing happened, says the room never existed, says the family is fiction. But here is the precise and specific thing that should not be dismissed. In November 2017, approximately 40 years after the story of room 873 entered public circulation, the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel undertook a targeted renovation of the 8th floor corridor. The renovation was not announced. It was not explained in any statement. It removed the last physical evidence that a door had ever existed at the location of room 873. Not the renovation of the whole floor, not a general update of all the corridors, the specific wall, the specific baseboard, the specific light fixture, the specific hollow space. If the story is fiction, the 2017 renovation was unnecessary. If the story is true, the 2017 renovation was not renovation. It was evidence destruction. The hotel has offered no explanation for why it was done. The family in room 873, whoever they were, whatever happened to them, has never received a formal acknowledgement from any institution that they existed. No death record, no investigation, no recognition. If they were real, they have never been named. If they were not real, the wall on the 8th floor did not need to be replastered. One of these things is true. The hotel has decided that we should not be able to determine which. There is a third absence at the Banff Springs Hotel. Not a ghost, not a sealed room. An absence so large that it is invisible. The kind of absence that is only visible when you know where to look. The Banff Springs Hotel cost $250,000 to construct in 1886. The Painter Tower, completed in 1914, cost $2 million. The north and south wings, rebuilt after the 1926 fire, cost millions more. These are the numbers in the hotel's official history. The figures that appear in the brochures and the heritage designations and the Parks Canada National Historic Site documentation. What those documents do not contain: the names of the workers who built the railway that made the hotel possible. Between 1881 and 1885, over 17,000 Chinese workers laid the western section of the Canadian Pacific Railway through the Rocky Mountain passes. They handled the nitroglycerin that blasted through the granite. They worked in cuts so narrow and so cold that frostbite was routine. They died in landslides, in cave-ins, in explosions, in the slow erosion of malnutrition and exposure. The estimates of their death toll range from 700 to 4,000. The real number is unknown. They were buried in unmarked graves along the line. Their families were not notified. Their names were not recorded in any archive that has been located. The monument erected to commemorate Chinese railway workers in Toronto bears an inscription that captures the precise nature of their erasure. All of them remain nameless in the history of Canada. We erect this monument to remember them. In the lobby of the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, there is a statue of William Cornelius Van Horn. He presides over the arrivals and departures of guests. He is acknowledged as the visionary who brought the mountains to the world. He is, in the hotel's institutional memory, the origin of everything. There is no memorial to the workers who built the railway that made his vision possible. No plaque, no acknowledgement in the hotel's historical displays. No space set aside to name what was done to the people who died so that this lobby could exist and Van Horn could stand in it. The hotel stands on Treaty 6, 7, and 8 territory. The Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel includes, in its current literature, an acknowledgement of this fact that the lands and waters of Banff National Park have been used for millennia by Indigenous peoples for sustenance, ceremony, trade, and travel. The acknowledgement is there. It is a single paragraph in the promotional materials. The Stoney Nakoda were excluded from the park between 1890 and 1920. 30 years during which a people who had called these mountains sacred for 10,000 years were legally barred from setting foot in them, so that wealthy tourists at the Banff Springs Hotel could experience the wilderness as untouched by human habitation. The acknowledgement of what was done has taken 130 years to produce. It is a paragraph. The exclusion was 30 years of law. These three absences, the unnamed bride, the unnamed family, the unnamed workers, are not separate stories. They are the same story. The Banff Springs Hotel is a building that has always known how to make certain people visible. Royalty, presidents, film stars descending the grand staircase in formal wear. These people are named, commemorated, photographed, celebrated. Their presence is the official history. The people who died building the railway, the people who were removed from the land, the family in room 873, the bride on the stairs. These people are either unnamed, denied, or transformed into a marketing tool that the hotel profits from without ever answering the question their story asks. The Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel has, over the course of nearly a century, developed a highly sophisticated institutional response to the stories that circulate about it. The response has two components. The first component is selective acknowledgement. Certain ghost stories are officially recognized and commercially developed. The Ghost Bride is acknowledged and monetized. Sam the Bellman is acknowledged and monetized. The Headless Piper, who occasionally plays bagpipes in the corridors, is acknowledged with a kind of fond institutional eye roll. These ghosts are given names in the hotel's marketing materials. They are given origin stories. They are featured on the Halloween tours. They are profitable. Room 873 is denied. The family in room 873 is denied. The sealed room is denied. The replastered wall is not discussed. The second component is the language of renovation. When physical evidence is found, the hollow wall, the cut baseboard, the missing room number, the hotel's explanation is always the same: renovation artifact. Rooms were enlarged, doors were moved, numbering systems were updated. Everything that looks like evidence is actually the ordinary residue of a building that has been modified many times over many decades. This explanation would be more convincing if the modifications that produce the evidence of room 873 were not confined to a single wall on a single floor, surrounded on all sides by rooms whose numbering and structure are consistent and normal. In November 2017, someone at the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel decided that the cut baseboard and the hollow wall and the missing room number were no longer acceptable. Made a decision. Someone authorized a renovation that addressed only those specific elements and no others. And that renovation was performed without announcement during a quiet period in the hotel's calendar, as if whoever authorized it understood that performing it publicly, with explanation, would raise exactly the questions it was designed to prevent. The hotel has offered no explanation for the 2017 renovation, not when asked by the travel blogger who documented it, not when asked by journalists who followed up, not in any public statement. The wall was replastered, the baseboard was replaced, the light was removed, and the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel has continued in the years since to sell Halloween ghost tours centered on the story of the Ghost Bride and Sam the Bellman, while declining to discuss Room 873. What happened at the Banff Springs Hotel is not unique to the Banff Springs Hotel. The institutional response to inconvenient deaths and sealed rooms in luxury properties follows a pattern that is recognizable across jurisdictions and across decades. The pattern has several steps. Step 1. Manage the immediate aftermath. Clean the room, conduct any necessary minimum official process, reopen the room to guests as quickly as commercially viable. Step 2. Absorb the complaints. When guests report disturbing experiences in the room, explain them as imagination, as the power of suggestion, as the product of a building old enough to produce ambient noises and temperature variations. Step 3. When complaints become commercially untenable, remove the room from service. Seal it. Describe the sealing as a renovation decision. Step 4. If physical evidence of the sealing becomes a source of public curiosity, remove the physical evidence during a quiet period. Describe this removal as an additional renovation decision. Step 5. If asked directly about any of the above, cite the absence of documentary evidence for the original event. The documentary evidence is absent because its preservation was never a priority of the institution that controlled it. The CPR performed this same pattern with the Chinese workers who died at building its railway. The workers' deaths were not recorded. Their families were not notified. Their graves were not marked. When the history of the railway was written and celebrated and institutionalized in photographs and monuments and the rhetoric of nation building, the workers were absent from it. Not because they had been deliberately erased in a single act, but because their preservation had never been the institution's concern. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It is evidence of who gets to decide what is preserved. The land on which the Banff Springs Hotel stands is managed by Parks Canada. The hotel operates within Canada's first national park under a lease arrangement with the federal government. The hotel is a designated National Historic Site of Canada. The designation celebrates the hotel as a leading Canadian example of a large-scale resort hotel in a natural setting. It celebrates the chateau-esque architecture, the scenic position, the significance of the CPR's railway hotel program to the development of Canadian tourism. The designation does not mention the Stoney Nakoda exclusion. The designation does not mention the Chinese workers who built the railway. The designation does not mention Room 873. The designation does not mention the Ghost Bride, for whom no death record has been found despite over 90 years of commercial use of her story. The federal government of Canada designated this building a National Historic Site in 1988. The designation describes a building of architectural and historical significance. It does not describe a building whose history includes the systematic erasure of the people who made it possible and the commercial monetization of deaths that have never been formally investigated. The designation says nothing about the 8th floor. What happened at the Banff Springs Hotel, the sealing of inconvenient rooms, the commercial use of deaths that were never formally investigated, the transformation of unnamed victims into marketing assets, did not stay at the Banff Springs Hotel. It became a model, not explicitly. Not in any document that says, "Here is how you manage the deaths of guests in luxury properties," but through the institutional logic that the hotel demonstrated across 140 years of operation. Some deaths are investigated and recorded. Others are cleaned up and used. The distinction between these categories is not determined by the severity of what happened. It is determined by who the dead person was and whether their death, fully examined in public, would damage or enhance the institution's commercial interests. The ghost bride enhances the hotel's commercial interests. She is romantic. She is beautiful. She is tragic in the specific way that sells postage stamps. Her death, if it happened at all, involved no powerful person whose accountability might be inconvenient. She is safe to commodify. The family in room 873 does not enhance the hotel's commercial interests. Their story involves a murder-suicide, violence against a woman and a child, in a room that was sealed and denied. Whatever happened in that room involved institutional decisions about what to preserve and what to erase. Those decisions are not romantic. They are not safe to commodify. They are a liability. The same logic that clears Chinese workers from a photograph because their presence complicates the celebration of national achievement is the logic that replasters a wall in the middle of November because the hollow sound behind it complicates the hotel's self-presentation. This is not a unique institutional pathology. It is a consistent feature of how powerful institutions manage inconvenient history. The names change, the building changes, the century changes. The logic does not. The Stoney Nakoda were excluded from Banff National Park between 1890 and 1920 and officially welcomed back in 2010. The reconciliation process between Parks Canada and the Iyarhe Nakoda and Tsuut'ina nations produced a co-management agreement in 2018 that gives Indigenous communities a formal role in park governance. The Bison Cultural Project, launched in 2017, returned 16 Plains bison to the park, a culturally significant species whose absence the Stoney Nakoda had mourned for generations. These are meaningful steps. They are also measured against 130 years of exclusion, recent. The Canadian government formally apologized for the Chinese head tax in 2006. Prime Minister Stephen Harper acknowledged the harm that the tax and subsequent exclusion policies had caused to Chinese Canadian communities. The apology came 121 years after the tax was imposed. The Chinese workers who died building the CPR, whose deaths enabled the existence of the Banff Springs Hotel and every other Grand Railway hotel in Canada, remain, in the hotel's official historical narrative, absent. Van Horn stands in the lobby. The workers are not named anywhere in the building. The Fairmont Hotels and Resorts chain includes in its current environmental and social governance communications commitments to Indigenous reconciliation, to acknowledging the traditional territories of First Nations, to sustainable operation within the landscapes it occupies. Room 873 has not been commented on. The 2017 replastering has not been explained. The Ghost Bride is still on the Halloween tour. The Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel stands today at 405 Spray Avenue, Banff, Alberta, within Canada's First National Park. It is, by any honest measure, one of the most beautiful buildings in North America. The gray Rundlestone exterior catches the mountain light in ways that change by the hour, golden in morning, silver at midday, blue in the long dusk of a Rocky Mountain evening. The 11-story Painter Tower rises above the valley floor and is visible from the Trans-Canada Highway, from the trails on the surrounding mountains, from the gondola ascending Sulphur Mountain directly behind it. The lobby is original, not in every detail, but in its essential atmosphere: the vaulted stone, the curved staircase, the chandeliers, the depth of the archways, and the quality of the silence between them. Guests who have returned to the hotel over decades report that it feels, in a way that very few buildings manage, essentially unchanged. The grandeur is not performed, it is structural. The Cascade Ballroom hosts weddings. The candles still line the curved staircase. The marble is polished to a surface that reflects the faces of everyone who descends it. The Oak Room, the hotel's flagship restaurant, closed in 2018. The space has been repurposed. The dark wood paneling is intact. On the 8th floor, the hallway is quiet. The rooms are numbered from 871 to 875, with a gap. The wall between those numbers is smooth plaster, freshly painted, continuous in its surface. giving no indication that anything was ever different. If you knock on it, it is solid. The baseboard runs in an unbroken line. The ceiling light above that section of wall is gone. The hotel offers an annual Halloween Heritage Ghost Tour. Rooms can be booked at premium rates for the experience. The Ghost Bride and Sam the Bellman are the featured attractions. Guests are encouraged to keep their eyes open for the smell of flowers on the staircase, for the sound of music in the ballroom when the room is closed, for the elderly Scotsman in the 1960s uniform who helps people find their rooms. They are not encouraged to knock on the 8th floor wall. There is no plaque on the 8th floor. There is no plaque anywhere in the hotel acknowledging the Chinese workers who died building the railway that made it possible. There is no acknowledgement in the hotel's historical displays of the specific number of workers who died or the conditions in which they were buried. The Van Horn statue stands at the entrance. The workers are not there. The hotel's website includes a land acknowledgement. It notes that the Fairmont Banff Springs operates on the present-day territories of Treaty 6, 7, and 8, and on the Métis homeland. The acknowledgement is sincere in its language. The lands and waters of Banff National Park have been used for millennia by Indigenous peoples for sustenance, ceremony, trade, and travel. The Stoney Nakoda were excluded from those lands for 30 years. The acknowledgement does not name those 30 years. There are 2 Banff Springs hotels. The first Banff Springs hotel is the one in the brochure, the one on the postage stamp. The one in the Parks Canada designation and the historic hotel's worldwide membership and the Fairmont marketing materials and the travel magazines and the Instagram feeds of the millions of guests who have stood in front of it and felt, in the presence of those limestone towers against those mountains under that sky, that they were somewhere that mattered. That hotel is real. The marble is real. The staircase is real. The mountains behind it are real. The beauty of the building is not manufactured or performed. It is the genuine product of the architectural ambition of people who wanted to build something worthy of one of the most magnificent landscapes on Earth, and largely succeeded. The worst that first hotel did was exist inside a system that required, for its creation, the erasure of certain people and the exploitation of certain others. The worst it did was celebrate the powerful and ignore the powerless with such consistency and skill that the celebration became the only story most people know. The second Banff Springs Hotel is the one on the 8th floor, the one with the smooth plaster wall and the missing room number, and the light fixture that was removed in November 2017 and never replaced. The one where something happened in 1928 that the institution spent nearly a century managing, sealing, denying, replastering, and has never been willing to name. The second Banff Springs Hotel is also the one in the photograph from the last spike ceremony, where every Chinese worker who built the western section of the CPR had been cleared from the frame before the camera fired. The one where 10,000 years of indigenous stewardship of the Bow Valley were legally ended so that wealthy tourists could experience the wilderness as pristine and untouched. These are not 2 different buildings. They are 2 descriptions of the same building. One the institution offers. One the institution has spent 140 years trying to prevent you from finding. The open questions remain. Who was in room 873? What happened to them? Where are the records, the police file, the death certificate, the inquest? That should exist if a murder-suicide occurred in a hotel in a national park in 1928. Where are they if they don't exist? Who authorized the November 2017 replastering, and what reason were they given for doing it? What did the workers who built the railway that made this hotel possible experience in the last moments before the blasting rock or the cold took them? And why does the man who employed them have a statue in the lobby while they have nothing? What did the Stoney Nakoda lose in 30 years of exclusion from mountains their ancestors had called temples? And does a single paragraph of land acknowledgement in the promotional materials constitute an adequate accounting of that loss? The hotel still stands at 405 Spray Avenue. The wall on the 8th floor is smooth, and the question of what happened behind it, whether it was a murdered family, a renovation artifact, or something else entirely, has no official answer. The Stoney Nakoda call the mountain behind the hotel Mini Ruin, foul-smelling water. They climbed it for 10,000 years to harvest medicinal plants and perform ceremonies and speak, as Chief John Snow described it, with the Great Spirit. The hotel sits at the mountain's foot and has been there for 137 years. Some buildings are built on silence and sell you the view. The wall on the 8th floor was replastered in November 2017, and the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel has never said who gave the order or why.